Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on Pacific Islander Heritage Month. This is the 9th year that Utah recognizes the 50,000 Pacific Islanders who call this state home. Tonight, our discussion aims to explore the heritage, challenges, and contributions of our Pacific Islander community members. Joining us tonight is Jake Fatisimanu Jr., Chair of the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition, and Susie Felch Malohifa'o, CEO of Pacific Islander Knowledge to Action Resource. Jake and Susie, thank you so much for being here tonight. We will start our conversation with Jake. Jake, what do we know about the history of the Pacific Islander population in Utah? What brought the first Pacific Islander community members to the state?
Yeah, interestingly, Pacific Islanders have been here for a very long time, and a lot of folks might be surprised to know that 1873 is the year that we have first record of Pacific Islanders being here. And so we actually have the longest continuous community of Pacific Islanders on the United States continent. The main reason they came initially was in association with the LDS Church, and word travels quickly through small communities of islands. And when folks realized this was a great place to really establish themselves, to progress and to raise families, more folks continue to come.
Now, Susie, you played a big role in the governor's declaration to recognize the month of August as Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Is there any significant reason why August was chosen for Pacific Islander Heritage Month?
There is. There were a couple of reasons. I think initially is the National Tongan American Society is the oldest community-based organization here, and they have the Friendly Island Festival, and I felt like we could grow around that in the month of August. And then we found out that Hawaiian Pioneer Day was August 1889, so it seemed like a really good idea to continue August of being our month.
And Susie, could you talk about the efforts to get August recognized in Utah as Pacific Islander Heritage Month? Does any other state make the same recognition, and how significant is this for our state?
Well, when I moved back here 10 years ago, one of the things when I learned that Utah was the home to the largest per capita Pacific Islander, I was like, that is amazing. And how come no other state, no other state could say that? And so I wanted to capitalize that. I mean, I'm not only just a Pacific Islander, but I'm a pro-Pacific Islander, and proud to be the granddaughter of my ancestors, and I felt like everyone should be that, no matter where you come from. And so I wanted to raise visibility of the positive things that so many Pacific Islanders have done in this state and are doing, because our cultural humility often stops us from saying, hey, we're doing a great job. So I felt like we needed a month to say everybody's doing a great job in our community, and to be that example for the next generation to use to be an example for them.
Well said. This is a question that I will ask each of you, and I'll start with Jake. What does Pacific Islander Heritage Month mean to you personally?
For me personally, being able to celebrate the diversity, the contributions that all communities make in the state of Utah is just a fabulous idea. And so being able to have a specific time to step back and actually recognize what the community has contributed, how much of an impact we have in the state, and all of the great things that we can offer to the state, and all of the ways that we contribute. This month really is a great opportunity to do that.
And Susie, what about you? What does Pacific Islander Heritage Month mean to you personally?
There were so many great things going on in the state when I moved back here. I really wanted to elevate everyone's voice, everybody's talents, their businesses, everything about our culture is that we can do, and we are doing, just as well as every other community. And I felt like to help our self-identity of being Pacific Islander, being American, being Utahn was really important, and educating our neighbors that one of the things that I think I found was that we didn't know the difference between a Micronesian, a Polynesian, and a Melanesian. That was something I noticed when I moved here to Salt Lake, to Utah. I was like, wow, we're Pacific Islanders, but we really are just paintbrushed all together. And I wanted to say there are 3 distinct groups that all live here in Utah that are contributing greatly to our state and to each of the cities that they live in.
Now, speaking of being paintbrushed together, Jake, May is celebrated as Asian American Pacific Islander, or AAPI month, and there are mixed feelings about the combined categorization of the 2 ethnic groups. What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that it's simply a numbers issue. When you look at aggregated data or combined data, what that does when you have a community of 1.5 million Pacific Islanders and over 20 million Asian Americans in this country, the larger group often overshadows the smaller group. And when we're looking at our needs and our specific issues in education, health disparities, socioeconomic mobility, and all those types of things, it doesn't help us when we're lumped into another group where we're actually subsumed by the larger group. And so it's very important to disaggregate, to separate out, to make sure that those distinctions are recognized. And that's a big reason why I'm a big proponent for Pacific Islander specific data collection and programming and all those types of resources. While we're happy to celebrate and stand in solidarity with our Asian American communities, our brothers and sisters in the Asian American communities, we do also have to recognize that we are distinct and that there are distinct needs, distinct contributions, and disaggregating is the way that we can actually address them.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and I feel like we could do a whole show just on that question alone. Sure. Jake and Susie, hold that thought. We do have to take a quick commercial break, but when we return, we'll resume our In Focus discussion on Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Before the break, we were joined by Jake Fatisimanu Jr., chair of the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition, and Susie Felch Malohifa'o, CEO of Pacific Islander Knowledge to Action Resource. We pick up now right where we left off. This is a question I will direct to both of you. We'll start with you, Jake. Where does Utah lie now when it comes to our Pacific Islander population as a state compared to the rest of the country?
Yeah, it's a timely question because in the last couple of days, the U.S. Census actually released some new data sets for apportionment, which show that we actually have almost 60,000 Pacific Islanders here in the state, which is 10,000 more people than we had projected even as recently as 2019.
And Susie, anything you would like to add to that?
Right, with this information, I believe that I read that Pacific Islanders had the highest increase from other ethnic groups here in the state. And so we're growing.
Yeah, we're learning new things as the new census data is come out and new research is coming out as well. Jake, Utahns are most familiar with people who are Tongan, Samoan, and Hawaiian when it comes to our Pacific Islander community. But earlier we were talking about how there's a lot more ethnicities that are included in that as well. Can you tell us about those other ethnicities?
I'd love to. Our community here is diverse. It's rapidly growing and diversifying. Our Pacific Islander, as a term, really embraces a wide variety of people. Pacific Islanders are not monolithic. There's a whole spectrum of individuals, some who, as I mentioned before, have been in the state of Utah for 6 or 7 generations, and others who are just recently arriving from places. One of the fastest growing communities are our Micronesian communities, and so folks who self-identify as Chamorro, as Chuukese, as Marshallese, and these groups are smaller, but they're coming and they're rapidly growing. And so as Pacific Islanders, this is a great opportunity for us to recognize the commonalities as well as the differences among our groups and really build an infrastructure that benefits everyone.
Well said. Susie, what challenges, barriers, or difficulties do our Pacific Islander community still face uniquely to this day?
Well, I think the immediate barriers that we're reaching right now is because of COVID. Our community has been crippled in the last year, and now with this new variant, the numbers are spiking with deaths and with hospitalization and with contractions. So, that to me is the very first thing and most immediate need that we have right now.
Jake, what about you? Anything you would want to add? What are some other maybe challenges, barriers, or difficulties that are unique to the PI community?
I think one thing that is an area of improvement would be civic engagement. We come from cultures and some cultures and some countries where universal voting and suffrage and those type of things may be a new concept, where we're used to having hereditary chiefs or royal or nobility kind of take that leadership role, whereas here we have to learn that this is our house. We are not house guests here. As citizens, we can vote, we can run for office, we can help make decisions that involve our communities, and that's definitely something that we can always improve.
Well said. Jake, how well would you say the representation of Pacific Islanders are in the state of Utah outside of stereotypical sectors such as athletics or entertainment?
I like that question because here in Utah, we are represented in all 29 counties. We have individuals who are in pretty much every sector, in every industry, and we have folks who are succeeding and our numbers are growing, and it's really great to see folks. We love excelling on the football field. We love that our folks are excelling in entertainment, in music, in film, but we also love the fact that we have Pacific Islanders as anchors on TV news channels here in Utah, that we have Pacific Islanders who are running programs, who are owning companies, who are district court judges, who are physicians, who are professors. This is an amazing thing to see our community grow in all of these different sectors.
And I do want to mention that Jake is also a council member for the city of West Valley, so you also serve us like in the public, and we appreciate you so much for doing that. Jake and Susie, hold that thought. We do have to take another quick commercial break, but when we return, we'll resume our In Focus discussion on Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We're going to pick up this conversation now with Jake. Jake, how do our Pacific Islander community members contribute to society?
The fact of the matter is that Pacific Islanders are engaged in pretty much every sector and every industry in the state. And so when it comes to our service sector, when it comes to our airline industry, when it comes to our manufacturing, our Pacific Islander folks are there supporting. And so there are also a lot of really great stories historically about, for example, the founding of Curtin McConkie Law Firm was by an individual with Samoan ancestry whose family had been here since the 1890s, as well as folks who are starting companies, who are entrepreneurs, who are doing great things in all different sectors across the state.
Now, Susie, could you tell us about your organization, Pacific Islander Knowledge to Action Resource, and what your organization does?
Oh, I'd love to. And I will, three pillars. But the first one is violence prevention, education, intervention, and healing. We have support groups, community health workers, case managers that are out in the community helping. The second pillar would be economic impact. Our Pacific Island Business Alliance has a Salt Lake County chapter, a Utah County chapter, and an Arizona chapter. And our third is the arts. PAO, Pacific Enriching Arts of Utah, really wanted to ground our community in their strengths. And I felt like art was something that we automatically, in our lives. I think in mainstream arts, they're trying to move towards where our community already is. Arts are part of our life every day, and we love the arts. So those were the three things. I think the foundation of what we do are resources, education, support, opportunities, and spaces to talk about all of those things.
Thank you so much. And Jake, same question to you. Can you tell us more about the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition?
The mission of the coalition really is to improve the quality of life for Pacific Islanders in the state and for all of our neighbors in the communities that we live in. Unfortunately, Pacific Islanders, while we're known as a very active and athletic community, we do have some health disparities, especially in terms of diabetes and other chronic diseases. And so the coalition works for the past 10 years, has worked to really provide resources, provide services, provide information, and even advocate and lobby for health policy that helps the underserved and the underrepresented, which in turn helps us all.
Now, Jake, Susie did touch on this a little bit in our last segment, but I'd like to go into it a little bit more. How has the Pacific Islander community been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19? And now that we're more than a year and a half since the beginning of the pandemic, do we have lessons learned? Are there any solutions that maybe your coalition is striving towards?
The pandemic has really raised or shined a light on issues that have existed for a long time, and not just disparities, but also the very powerful assets that we have in our community in terms of mobilizing, in terms of providing services. And so over the last 12 months, Pacific Islanders in the state of Utah have been either #1 or #2, and mostly #1 when it came to new case rates, hospitalization rates, and even mortality. And so for a very small community to have that kind of impact from this virus, every single one of our Pacific Islander families, churches, organizations here in the state have been impacted, have lost individuals during this pandemic. And a lot of the lessons we've learned have been around how to leverage and how to really mobilize our communities to make sure that information is getting out, the services are getting out, that there are clinics for testing as well as for vaccination, and leveraging those cultural strengths that we have.
Thank you so much for that. I know it's a tall task, but we have learned so much during this pandemic, and hopefully we can take that information and move this fight forward. Susie, as we get ready to wrap this segment, could you give us a rundown of the remaining events for Pacific Islander Heritage Month?
Sure. Online, we have our Utah Pacific Island film series that is going to be showing a free film online, I think it's Men of Hula, I apologize. And then this weekend, we are going to be at Farmers Market in Lehigh. It is going to be their Pacific Island Heritage Month celebration with vendors, with food, craftsmen, with entertainment both Friday and Saturday. Our youth entrepreneurs, on Saturday are Claire's Silly Things. She'll be in Rose Park. She's one of our youngest youth entrepreneurs. 9 years old. Last year she made $1,000 in 4 hours.
Wow.
And so we look forward to what she's got this year. And another youth entrepreneur the following week will be doing their lemonade stand in West Jordan as well. We are really excited that this year, on Saturday, August 28th, is our first Pacific Island Youth Pitching Competition. We just got entries. I don't know how many we're going to have, but there's a $4,000 prize for first place, and we're excited to hear what our young people have been working on so hard, and we will close the month out.
Now, when you say pitching, is it baseball pitching or pitching ideas? What exactly?
It's a business pitching competition.
It's a business pitching competition. Yes. Okay, that's what you meant by the entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Okay, and there's something happening in September as well, right? There's a festival going on at Thanksgiving Point, Polynesian Days. Tell us about that event.
So we have bookends, right? So we start in July with the kickoff, and we always end in September. For the holiday at Polynesian Days at Thanksgiving Point. And very happy to have the organization in Utah County that puts that together.
And if people want more information, obviously we sort of gave this information to our viewers really fast. Where can they find more information about these events?
You can go to our website, www.upihm.com.
Perfect. We have time for final words. Jake, what would you like to leave our viewers with tonight as they're listening to our conversation or thinking about Pacific Islander Heritage Month?
We're Pacific Islanders. We're your neighbors. We've been here. We've been an integral part of the history of this state and continue to be contributors, and we're happy to celebrate our community this month.
And Susie, what about you? What would you like to leave our viewers with tonight?
I think this is the month we want you to come and learn about us, and we want to learn about you. We are really family and community oriented people and have lots of strengths. We didn't come to this country empty-handed. With our experiences, our ancestors came with lots of strengths, and we'd like to share those with other communities and hopefully have you learn from them and implement them in your lives as well.
Lovely. You've been hearing from Jake Fatisimanu Jr., Chair of the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition, and Susie Felch, Malohi Fa'o, CEO of Pacific Islander Knowledge to Action Resource. Thank you both for being here tonight. We appreciate your time in this insightful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And don't forget, we would love to hear from you about the show. We invite you to join our Facebook group by searching ABC4 In Focus, or send us an email, infocus@abc4.com.